Sometimes life gives us lemons. Sometimes it gives us lemonade. Other times it gives us something entirely out of left field that makes us say, WTF. But no matter what obstacles come, there is most often a way out on the other side, and we are once again victorious. My name is Dr. Rowe, and you are listening to my podcast about resilience. Every guest shares a tragedy to triumph story to give listeners like you the inspiration to push through every single day. Listen now as my next guest shares how they were lifejacked.
What do you do when everything you do and everything around you causes extreme stress and you struggle to be able to heal yourself? My name is Dr. Rowe, and this is Lifejacked, the Resilience Podcast. Lifejacked is when an unfortunate or unplanned event happens to jack with your life. My guest for this week, Peter Bedard, will share how he survived an astounding 5 near-death experiences, relearned how to walk, and healed himself from a number of medical conditions over the years. Peter has now turned his attention to his personal passion for alternative health and healing. He is a hypnotherapist with a master's in consciousness studies. Peter is an author of several books and the host of his own internet alternative health show called Create Your Health. Listen as he shares his method called the Convergence Healing Process, as it helps individuals create a path for their healing that is guided by the pain itself. Hi, Peter. Welcome. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. How are you?
Hi, it's fun to be here. Thank you. I'm well.
So, Peter, you had an interesting experience when you were just shy of your 18th birthday. Can you share with the listeners what happened?
Sure. So I was doing something that was a big milestone in my life at that time. I was approaching 18, and I had been a performer when I was about 9 years old, and I had seen a cousin of mine in a play, and my parents had seen the play for the first time. It was How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying at Stanford University. My cousin was in that play, and I turned to my parents and I said, that's what I wanted to do. And to their dismay, because they had this, I think this was literally their first play they'd ever seen, I suddenly became an actor, and I was devoted to it. I loved it. I did it as a kid. I was the kid that was immediately escalated into all the adult shows. So I would do the older adult plays, and I was the kid in the town, or the kid riding the bike, or kid jumping off something. That was my role. And I was very excited because my grandfather had an opportunity, but when he wasn't working, he played the banjo, and every now and then he would get to be in a vaudeville show. So back in the day, he would play his banjo in some vaudeville shows, and I grew up with him playing his banjo. And an opportunity opened up in my town, and there was a vaudeville house, and they were auditioning, and I went and auditioned for that show. So it was really fun. I got cast in the show, and it was opening night weekend. It was just a big deal for me. It just felt like a milestone. And I wasn't allowed to go to the cast party after the show because I was underage. My parents were very strict, and so I had to come home, and I was very angry at them. And I'm riding my Moped King, which is like a very small moped. I'm driving home on my bike, and I'm in a curve, and it was kind of an S curve. I'm heading into the suburbs where my family lived, leaving a little downtown area. And I was in that curve, and a car came up behind me in that curve as we were in the center of the S, if you could think of it that way. I had just approached the middle of that S, and in that curve, there was a semi-truck that was parked there, and the car that was behind me came up very suddenly. I didn't have any preparation. It hit the back tire of my car, and it pushed me into the parked semi-truck. So I died. I jumped out of my body. I got to watch the whole experience, and I saw my body hit the truck. I saw my bike hit the truck and bounce out into the street. I saw the car drive away, and I was just hovering above the experience. being completely disconnected from my body, being curious about looking at my body and even thinking things like, oh, that gotta hurt. But I wasn't in there. And then I went to the other side. So I died. I went to the other side. I had an experience over there, which is a whole other story. But obviously I came back, and I'm here to share that with you today.
Wow. So this out-of-body experience, can you kind of give details about that?
Sure. So when I was on this side and observing everything, there wasn't any pain. And I think that's a very interesting thing. And I also think it's a life lesson. Like, I got to choose whether or not I really believe this, whether or not I wanted to go through that suffering or in that pain. And so I believe, and this is again my beliefs, that I had already done that. I tend to believe that we have many lives, and I just didn't need to do that. So I watched the whole thing, and it was a very interesting process to watch my death. It was very, very interesting. Going on the other side, I was shooting down a tube, and the tube was sort of a spinning round tunnel-like thing, and I was shooting through that. It felt very cosmic because, as I later learned, there was something to it for me where it was like a corkscrew, this experience of shooting down this tube that was corkscrewing through time and space, which I later learned is what our galaxy does. You know, it's not a flat galaxy like we tend to be taught in school. Back in the day when I was in school, it was, the sun was in the middle and everything revolved around the sun. Well, that sun's actually shooting through time and space, and everything's corkscrewing around that sun. And that was the experience for me in the tunnel. So I ended up on the other side, and there was nobody there. I was in this space that was just magnificent. It was all white, and yet in the white there were colors, kind of like when you have a prism, a beautiful piece of glass that the sun hits, and then you get all these refracted colors off of that. There were so many colors, but everything was kind of white and refracting in that space. So there were colors that I've never seen before with my human eyes. It was just this most beautiful, amazing experience. I was aware that I was in a space, but I couldn't notice any floor or ceiling, and I could see forever. It was just this space, but it had gravity, or it had something to it, some defined space. It didn't feel empty. It felt full, and it felt, but I felt held in that experience.
So you're in this place, but obviously you came back. So did you know to come back? Were you pulled back?
Well, that's what happened next. So,
right?
Right. There were so many layers happening at the same time. Like, my mind was thinking simultaneous thoughts in this place. Thought was a very interesting thing. You could have many thoughts at one time. It wasn't just multitasking. It was literally full consciousness in many different forms. So I'm in this other place, and I'm curious. I'm excited. I feel more joy, more bliss. I can't tell you. When I give my speaking, and I'm a speaker, and when I talk, sometimes I'm asked to talk about this, and one of the things I say is that death is the best thing that ever happened to me. It's actually something that we need to look forward to. Death is beautiful. The other side is amazing. If you can take every adjective that's a positive, uplifting adjective of love, of bliss, of just amazement, and multiply it by 20 million trillion times, you still couldn't come up with the actual feeling of absolute joy on that other side. So I was in this place of joy, and at the same time I was curious. I was super curious at where everybody was, because I thought when I died there was going to be a whole bunch of people, my dead dog, my great-grandmother. I thought I was going to see all these people. Nobody was there. I was just wandering around the space, and I turned around, and yes, there was an experience of physically, like I had a body. It was just a different kind of body. But I turned around, and I saw this person, and my heart just began to rip out of my chest. It was just this ecstatic experience. It was painful, and it was ecstatic. It was like my ribs had just been broken open, and my heart was reaching out to this person. And at the same time that I'm having this ecstatic, blissed out experience, I'm thinking in my head, I'm literally thinking, who the hell is this? And it was this person that I couldn't identify. He looked like Fu Manchu, and I'm thinking, I don't know if you know Fu Manchu or the ancient Chinese lore of Lao Tzu, the old man. He had like a wispy long mustache that went down into a wispy beard. And I'm thinking, God is Chinese? But I saw this person. But right, I saw this being, and he was wearing, there's something about what he was wearing. He was wearing like a tweed, heavy tweed plaid suit with a very specific hat that made me think of, and I popped into my head, and remember, all this is happening at the same time, popped into my head the thought of like British Hong Kong back in the 1800s. This is what the man looked like to me. And I'm curious, I'm weirded out by why am I in love with this person? Who is he? I can see through him. He looked like a hologram. Why is he wearing tweed? Why is he Asian? I have no idea what's going on. And the blissed out experience. And I say to him, he says to me, we have a little bit of a conversation, and he says to me, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm here. I'm looking for everybody. Where's my family? And he says, you're not supposed to be here. And I take this as a lesson in life that I brought back with me, that there are accidents in the universe. We may all be going the same place. I don't believe you can ever get this wrong. Everybody goes to heaven. Everybody is loved. The divine is absolutely there for all of us. There is no true right or wrong. We're all ending up, when that time comes, at the same place in absolute love. But there are accidents that happen along the way. We all have free will. We all have experiences. We all have our own life journeys bumping into everybody else's life journey. And a lot of people I come from a theological background, a lot of people in their spiritual, Christian or non-Christian or theological or whatever world say there are no accidents. I beg to differ. I say there are accidents, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that things happen. We bump into each other. Someone literally bumped into me. I died. I left my body, but it wasn't my time. And so at that moment, I was very upset. The anger that I had not being able to go to that party I wanted to go to, the resentment of my parents always being the good kid, doing what I was told, and yet, now I'm in this accident. That anger up in this place of heaven or whatever you want to call it suddenly came back into me. And I literally flipped off this person or this angelic being because I didn't want to go back. This place was amazing. I flipped him off and said, well, I'm here. And the next minute I wasn't. The next minute I was back on this plane and this experience. I was not in my body. I was not in my body at all. I was back in that place of watching my body. And I saw the paramedics come. I saw them get out of their truck. I saw them pull the gurney out. I saw one prepare the gurney and the other one go and check for vital signs. I scared the crap out of that guy because I jumped back in my body for a brief second and he literally jumped up like a cat, like all four legs up in the air. And because he was hunched over me looking for vitals while I was laying on the ground. And I told him to take me to the hospital that I was a member of, and then I jumped back out of my body. And as a side note, one of the things that I was thinking at that time was, I guess this is how ghosts are made. As funny as or strange as that may sound, because I did not want to go back into my body. I was convinced I wasn't going back into my body. I was going to let my body die and they were going to take it away because I did not want to be in this life after going to the other side, after seeing how my body had been destroyed. I did not want to go back into it. And I literally thought to myself, I guess I get to be a ghost now because I won't have a body to go back in. And maybe that's what a ghost is.
What injuries did you sustain exactly?
So my body was slammed into the semi-truck. Luckily, I had my helmet on, and my helmet pretty much saved me. It was cracked. I shattered my left knee into little bits, and it was a rear knee injury, which is very unusual. It's what happens to a lot of football players if their knees are damaged while they're playing ball. And they flew 14 surgeons in from the NFL, delayed my surgery so that they could do an experimental surgery on my knee. So it was shattered into little bits, and they rebuilt that. I had 5 vertebrae that were cracked. I split my right wrist open. The bones at the wrist had popped open, and I lost all the nerves in my right hand. And I don't know why they didn't think to test for this, but many years later, I found out that I had brain damage, and that went undiagnosed for almost 2 decades. And I had a lot of issues with thinking properly, being able to speak properly, words being replaced. I would say one word and think another word, stuff of that sort.
Wow. So I'm assuming this is where you had to learn how to walk again. So what was that healing like?
Yeah, I had to learn how to do a lot of things again. So like I said, I was discovered as a dancer. I was a theater kid. I had all of that going for me. I was good. I was getting reviews from, being a child. It was my path. It was where I wanted to go. Dance especially was something that I felt when I discovered dance. I had that body. If I would have been built for football, that I would have had that body for that sport. But I was built for dance. I was long and lean, and I was very strong, and my hips weren't turned out. My ankles were turned out. I had really strong legs. I could leap into the splits. I could do all kinds of stuff. It was just a natural thing. And I knew that I had lost my voice. That it felt to me that dance was my way of understanding the world, of being able to exist in the world, to speak. And that had been taken away from me. So I was very suicidal for a long time. I had to learn how to walk again. I had fibromyalgia and arthritis and asthma. I had bronchitis that ended up happening. I had all kinds of other issues, white blood cells that were attacking red blood cells for some unknown reason. My hemoglobin in my blood was splitting and shutting down my organs. There's lots of things along the way that sort of were triggered. I call it a cascade. One thing happened that led into another, that led into another, led into another.
That is a lot for one person to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to ask you, you've been diagnosed with a few illnesses. And so what is the status now with these illnesses?
So the doctors were amazing. That surgery that the surgeons came out to do and from the NFL and put my leg back together, that was a huge success. After that, they really didn't know what to do. So they just kept offering me pain meds, or they kept saying, they maybe will have another surgery that might help or something of that sort. And I didn't want another surgery that maybe might be able to help. I really wasn't interested in maybes. And I wasn't interested in the drugs. For whatever reason, my personality, I do not like medications. And medications don't sit well with my body. So I spent years being in just excruciating amounts of pain. And I just started to stumble into, because nobody was really talking about it at the time, into more holistic medications and treatments and stuff of that sort. So I just started doing, if somebody said, hey, I found a great fill in the blank, I went. Whether it was a chiropractor or an iridologist or a reflexologist or an acupuncturist or whatever it was, I just went. And I kind of became an expert at holistic healing. And that led me down my path of where I am today. It's again, I call that my gold, right? Today I get to talk to you. Today I get to see clients. Today people read my books. I get to speak at places. That's the gold that came out of the garbage of all that pain.
So you also experienced anxiety. Do you think you always had anxiety, or do you think it came of the accident?
Oh, anxiety definitely came into my life at the time of the accident. Yes. Anxiety was not knowing if I was going to be able to walk again, not knowing if I was ever going to feel good again, not knowing how I was going to support myself, not knowing what I would do with my life. I literally had lost my way of being in the world. So it would like always go back to football that, when a football player loses their hit on the field that they can never play again, that's their love, that's their passion, that's their joy, that's what they know how to do, that's how they know how to make money, that's everything. And that's what happened to me. I didn't know who I was anymore. I had an anxiety attack big time. A crisis of identity, all kinds of stuff. So anxiety's been a friend of mine for a long time, and that's how it led me to that convergence healing process you spoke about in our opening.
Wow. And I want to ask you, anxiety is a debilitating affliction that many people, myself included, deal with. Why do you think, people do not seek help to deal with their anxiety?
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry that you have had to deal with anxiety as much as you had and and it's something that let's go into in a little bit, but I have lots of ideas for anxiety and working through pain in general. I think most people don't go into it, and in our American Western system, at least American specifically, we're supposed to just pull up our bootstraps. There's this weird sort of myth, just get it done, get out there, do it, don't complain, all that type of stuff, which just ends up shoving stuff down. Yeah, and that resilience is wonderful, but when the resilience is at a cost, when the resilience is achieved by shoving stuff down, by denying the pain, by denying truth, when it's achieved in that way, I don't really think of it as true resilience. You're getting through, you're getting by. Resilience to me is far more than that. It is what I learned to do in my life, where I'm present with all things. And that's what I do with my clients. I want my clients to make their pain, whether it's anxiety or a tumor, I want them to make that part of them their best friend. I say it's a calling. It is calling us to actually become truly resilient, to truly heal, or it is going to take us under. And we have to hear that calling.
Now, you have said our brains are plastic and our lives are shaped by us. If we choose to accept that freedom, what do you mean by that?
So it's something that I've come to call radical responsibility. Like, I was a victim to the person that killed me, right? Somebody murdered me, they killed me, I think they did it on purpose. That person was never found. It felt very purposeful in what they did. So I was a victim to the violence, but I chose not to live as a victim. And in doing that, I had to take responsibility. It's my life. It's my voice. This is my breath. What am I going to do with it? And that was one of the first steps in my healing, by letting go of being that victim, because I was being enabled. People kept giving me drugs. Oh, we're so sorry. What a horrible thing. They were trying to make me feel better, all of that type of stuff, which I suppose is nice, but it can often keep us trapped in the pain, and we don't progress. Like, if I would have followed that route, I truly believe, of the surgeries and the drugs and being a victim to that mentality, to that person, to what they did to me, if I would have followed that path, I do not think I would be here today. And if I was to be here, I would be in a wheelchair. Because the resilience to me was standing up and learning to love the pain. And so for your anxiety, or anybody's anxiety, I would say the purpose of that anxiety is to protect you in some way. It doesn't feel safe. It's in a fight, flee, freeze, or hide experience, right? It's in a traumatic response experience. What it needs more than anything is to be loved. It doesn't need to be beaten up. It doesn't need to be punished. It doesn't need to feel unworthy. It doesn't need to be made shame or to have shame brought to it. It needs love. It's a part of you that's suffering. And when we stop and we actually sit with that part, I ask my clients to give it a shape and a form so their brain doesn't shut down, because things like anxiety, pain, overwhelm, they shut down our brains and we don't function anymore. So when we can think of that pain or that anxiety as coming into the room and like, okay, Bob's here. I don't like Bob the Blob, but I know he's suffering. And so, like a friend coming to me that's hurting, I'm going to choose to love Bob and actually ask Bob, what do you need right now? You're feeling anxious right now, Bob. I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to sit with Bob and I'll hold Bob's hand. And that's what became that convergence process, the coming together, understanding that every pain has a physical side to it, has a mental side to it, has a spiritual side to it. And then actually taking steps to create the healing on all of those levels.
Yeah, I want to talk about this method that you developed called convergence healing. I know you kind of started a little bit about it, but please share with the listeners exactly what this method is.
Yeah, so I back in the early 90s when I was a kid, and I was going through all of this stuff, there was something that started to come out in the treatment of cancer and HIV or AIDS. They started to talk about this cocktail, and they were combining drugs, pharmaceuticals, in order to help people, and it was working. And that combination idea, these things coming together, which is what a convergence is, right? These things coming together to create health. And I started to see that our way of looking at pain, and again, I'm talking about whether it's physical pain, mental pain, or spiritual pain, because I don't know about you, but I've had broken bones, and a broken heart has hurt far more than a broken bone. So understanding that, right? Yeah, you got me there, right? So understanding that, when I had my leg shattered, right, that was a physical pain. But there was also that mental pain of, what do I do with my life? Where do I go? How do I take care of myself, right? That anguish of just spinning out of control, catastrophizing, and anxiety, right? And then there's that spiritual pain of that broken heart. My love, my passion was to be a dancer, was to be a performer. I couldn't do that anymore. And so that wound was multi-layered. And when I started to treat that wound, I often found that the physical pain that I had would go away when I would deal with the mental side of it, or when I would deal with the heart spirit side of it. And so I started to notice also what I described just a moment ago. When I went into these pain experiences, my brain would shut down. I would feel stuck. I would feel depressed. I would feel anxious. I'd feel trapped. Like I had nowhere to go. Like a wet blanket was just put on my brain, and everything was just frozen in time, shut down. And when I started to look at my pain and say, I'm going to give it a shape and a form, that's Bob the Blob. I would literally ask for the pain to step outside of me, and your listeners can do it now. You can do it now. If there's any part of you that's suffering, ask it to take on a shape and a form so that you can then have a conversation with it. You can relate with it. It's not going to just overwhelm and shut you down. So it always shows up to me. It could show up as anything. It could show up as an emptiness. It could show up as a vast field of nothing. It could show up as a thunderbolt, a knife. It could show up as a black, whatever, cloud, a horrible, heavy, tar-like experience. It could show up as any way, whatever, a younger version of yourself. So to have that part show up, give it a name, and say to it, I'm so sorry you're suffering. And stop beating it up through your shame or your embarrassment or your disappointment. And to say to it, what can I do to help you heal physically? What can I do right now? You're hurting. What can I do right now physically? Do you want to go outside? Do you want to put your feet in the grass? Do you want to lay down? Do you need to take a bath? What do you need physically? What do you need mentally? Because the way you've been thinking has not been working. What do you need to think about instead? Even if it's just turning on and watching a bunch of silly cat videos or something like that, right? At least I'm not thinking in the way I was thinking, in that desperate, sad, victim-like thinking. Then, on that heart level, what can I do for my heart, for that connection, that oneness, what I like to think of as nature? What can I do to help you heal on that level of the heart? And as I started to answer those questions, that's when my healing really, really accelerated. And I would encourage people to do what I did and what I do with my clients, which is to have them bring those things together. If, on the physical level, your pain is saying you need to go outside and breathe, or put your feet in that grass, or feel the cool ocean waters, go do that on the same day that you go and sit or meditate or read some inspirational work or work with your coach. Those days that lift your heart, do all of these things at the same time. It's that holistic cocktail of healing. And by applying that method, I have seen miracles happen in my practice since I have been practicing. It's almost 20 years.
Now, I know the positive impact that your method has had on you, but I would love for you to share a memorable experience or a success story from your work that highlights the impact you've had on someone else.
There's so many. One that comes to mind is, for a time there, I had a lot of cancer clients, specifically women with breast cancer. And I found that a lot of their pain was actually not the tumor. It was a lack of being mothered. It was so interesting. A lot of these women, majority of them, were mothers. They were spouses. They had husbands or wives, and they had children. And most of them were beautiful, exceptional mothers who never were mothered, who never got that maternal care. And that was like a common thing that I found among them. And when we worked on that part, even though I'm a male therapist, right? When we worked on that part of going in and letting them be nurtured, cared for, held, stop being the rock for everyone else and actually learn how to lean on someone else and to do that type of stuff for themselves. They would be the first to tell their children or, their friends that, well, you need to stop, you need to go take a vacation, you need to be nice to yourself, but they wouldn't do that for themselves. And to get them to reverse that pattern and actually, be mothering to themselves and to have those conversations with the part, hey, how do you need to be loved today? And to take that approach of, okay, there's a missing energy of the maternal. How can we bring that maternal energy into the physical, into the spiritual, into the mental, and the way you're thinking, right? In that receiving. So that was one little thing. I had so many people just turn around their cancers. However they decide to do it. I'm an advocate for holistic health, but I'm primarily an advocate for people learning to have these conversations inside themselves with the part that's suffering and to follow its guidance. So even though I may say, I think a holistic approach is best when dealing with certain things, I would say my opinion doesn't matter. What does the part of you that's suffering need more than anything? And some people would choose the allopathic route, and some people would choose the holistic route. Some people would make a combination of both. And in doing that, the healing was remarkable. In my first book, Convergence Healing, in that book, I write about a woman that I called the warrior. And she was like this warrior goddess, and she was just absolutely amazing how she turned her life around.
How do you stay updated with the latest developments and research in our alternative health and healing?
I used to do a lot of that. I used to be a junkie and just like reading about this and going to scholarly articles and all that type of stuff. And since more and more over the years, I go into this practice that was given to me, this practice of learning to be with that part that's suffering and developing a relationship with it. That's an ongoing, organic relationship for the rest of your life. This isn't just a single conversation. That anxiety that is there, it is serving a purpose, and its purpose is generally to protect you. And if you work through it right now and it sits back down and it's no longer upset, it may come back at some point to try and protect you again. And so to have that ongoing conversation, more and more my work is just going deeper into that conversation, less about what's happening on the Lancet and other things that I used to read a lot of, more just about exploring this process with my clients and myself, even learning even more about myself and my own healing abilities and my clients' healing abilities, and how love has taken on a whole new form. When I grew up as a child of hippies, and love just never really meant very much to me, that word. As I'm getting older, this idea of loving our pain, loving the experience, the journey that we are on, no matter what the journey is, learning to be in that love and what love actually looks like, having love be a verb instead of a noun, where it's actionable, that has become so important to me. And so I really do believe that love can heal. We may not get the results that we want, right? I once helped a person die. He came to me saying he wanted to live, and what ended up happening was he died. And the most beautiful journey happened along the way. And because he learned to love, he died happier than he ever was. His wife came to me and told me that, on his deathbed, I'd seen him a couple days before. He was actually smiling. And this man was not generally a happy man. So his healing was to die in a way that was full of life. And that was just a remarkable gift.
Wow. In your opinion, what are the best ways to build resilience?
So resilience, I think, is an inner thing. It's not an outer thing. We look at, in our sort of westernized culture, we look at resilience as achievements. We look at it as, I did this, I did that. And I see, my clients have taught me over the years that just because they may achieve something doesn't mean they're happy. Resilience is the ability to be in joy. And I make a difference between joy and happiness. Resilience is the experience of living in joy no matter what the outside circumstances are.
Peter, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. Can you take the time to let everyone know how they can do your show, contact you for services, or purchase one of your books?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that opportunity. By the way, you've been lovely to talk to. Thank you so much. People, it's been fun. I know I get very passionate sometimes, so I hope that was well. People can find me online. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Yelp. I'm sure there's some other platforms that I'm on too. My first book was published with Simon & Schuster, and they can find my second book at all those same places. They could go into a Barnes & Noble. They could find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble itself, or they could go to Kindle or Audible. Any of those places they could find my book, and they could buy it directly from me if they would like it to have a autograph on it. And my website is convergencehealing.com, and that's CONVERGENCE, Convergence Healing.
Well, that's amazing. Two things that really stood out to me that in this conversation was that I love that you said was that resilience shouldn't come at a cost, and that we should focus on love being a verb and not a noun. That's amazing.
Love is demonstratable, right? When, we think we know love and we fall in love and we have these experiences, but does that love, is it demonstrated? Is it felt? Is there your partner demonstrating it to you, or you demonstrating it to your partner? These relationships, we say we're in love and the person's abusing us. I'm sorry to say that I've told my clients before, pardon me, but I don't think you've ever experienced love. And they say, well, I'm in love. And I say, that isn't love.
Wow.
Love isn't abuse.
Right. Any last words of encouragement for the listeners?
Well, like I said, resilience is that ability for me to be able to be on the inside and to be able to have that joy. And I differentiate joy and happiness in that joy is something that I think is a spark of the divine. I think every one of us have it. It is always there. It always will be. We are born with it. To learn to call forward that joy, that experience. It's like I've been at funerals and they've been the most joyous experience. There have been love and laughter and joy, even in the sadness. The joy is this umbrella experience. To nurture that joy as compared to happiness, which I think is conditional. Happiness is when somebody says, hey, you look cute today, or hey, I got a raise, or look at my new car. It goes away. Joy is eternal, and to go inside and learn to find that joy that will be there in any moment, under any circumstance, I think that's true resilience.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for being the first guest and first episode of Season 2. I wish you nothing but blessings and abundance within your life, for you and your family. Please take care.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Lifejacked, the Resilience Podcast with your host, Dr. Rowe. Are you interested in having your business or service advertised on this podcast for thousands of listeners to hear? Then please send me an email at lifejacked@email.com if you are interested in becoming a sponsor of one of my episodes. And remember to live, laugh, love, learn, and then repeat. See you in the next episode.